Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting of February 13th, 2023. Just a reminder that members of the public can present to council in the chambers during the meetings, and alternatively, public members can observe our meetings via Zoom. And the Zoom link is on our City of Trail website. So we do have a couple of items to do in our agenda before we can move forward with the presentation and the question period. I will start with the adoption of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes in front of us. The first set of minutes is the Governance and Operations Committee meeting, January 23rd, 2023. And the second set of minutes is the regular council meeting of January 23rd, 2023. The recommendation is before council, and is there anyone that wants to make that motion, please? Councillor Butler, Councillor Hanson. All those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. So we do have a delegation from BC Housing that wants to speak on the temporary use permit at 585 Roslyn Avenue. And then second on the agenda will be a presentation from Interior Health. So I see that BC Housing is all online. So I guess I'll just ask them to come into the conversation, please.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Council. Thank you very much for having us here today. Let me start by acknowledging that we live and work on the unceded traditional and ancestral homelands of hundreds of Indigenous peoples and nations across British Columbia, each with their own unique traditions, history, and culture. I'll introduce the BC Housing panelists who are here today. I'm Tyler Baker, Director of Development for the Interior Region. I'm here with Nanette Drobot, who is the Regional Director for Operations for the Interior, and Rachel McGecky, who is the Supportive Housing Advisor focusing in the Kootenay area, and Douglas Winter, who is the Development Manager on this project and who also works primarily in the Kootenay region on development projects. So we have a brief presentation, which I'm just going to pull up here 1 second. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So what are we talking about today? Last year, the permit for the current shelter was extended only to September of this year. So since that time, we've worked very diligently, I would say, with city staff, and we consulted with the previous council on an alternate site to comply with council's direction that we terminate shelter uses at the downtown site by September of this year. So the site that we have been working on is the one on Rossland Avenue, 585 Rossland Avenue. And the request today is that council approve a temporary use permit for 3 years on that site. The temporary location will allow us to continue the search for a permanent location for supportive housing and trail. We know this site on Rossland Avenue is not going to suit everybody. In fact, it isn't even really large enough for us to put the permanent site on there. So it really is a stopgap measure until we can find a permanent site, which we are working carefully on. But there's no way a permanent site would be or ever was going to be found by September of this year. The previous council direction always required that we find another temporary site. So that's what we're here today with. Today, we're just going to briefly talk about the housing and homelessness situation in Trail. It's a bit of background. And then we'll talk about the temporary site at Rosslyn Avenue. What exactly are we proposing today? And then the implications of the decision that council will be making today. And we're happy to respond to any questions at the end that council may wish us to. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Nanette.
Thanks, Tyler, and thanks for the opportunity this evening. This graphic is all around what we are doing across the boundary Kootenay in terms of shelter services. Excuse me. And all of these came to be, with the exception of Nelson, where it is a permanent shelter in a permanent location. They all came to be sort of at the onset of COVID in March 2020, when we realized we needed to do more for the vulnerable population and being really unsure about the impact of COVID. And these were all under temporary use permits in leased temporary locations. And so you see Castlegar, we have 13 beds, Grand Forks, we have 15 beds. And of course, Trail, we've had 18 beds. All of these shelters have a number of things in common. The first is the demand has been significant. They are mostly always full. There's never any empty beds. We've seen all walks of life through the doors of these temporary shelters, from people, you know, young adults all the way up to seniors. The other thing we're seeing is shelter work is very challenging, and you see it from the perspective of the shelter guests who are accessing shelter services, as well as the operators and the staff who are delivering those shelter services. Next slide. So this graphic is really just trying to provide perspective on why people become homeless. And one of the primary reasons is that, as we've seen throughout the province, and including Trail, is the lack of affordable housing. We've also seen people just can't afford their rent. We've also seen redevelopment. And so owners selling their residence, whether they're apartments or homes, or even people who are precariously housed, things are being sold in the real estate market because it was hot up until just a few months ago. And then it gets slated for redevelopment. So then people lose their housing. We've seen people lose housing because of traumatic events in their life. It could be a marital breakdown. It could be family violence or abuse. It could be a car accident, which renders someone unable to work, resulting in homelessness. We've also seen that our institutions contribute to homelessness. It could be because a youth ages out of foster care without an appropriate transition plan. It could be people being discharged from hospital or corrections. So you see there are a number of pathways to homelessness, and we see it every day through the doors of the shelter. Everyone has a different story. And having that foundation, I think, helps us to, it helps us lead with compassion and helps us to work together towards solutions to these very complex issues. Next slide, Tyler. Over to my colleague, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nanette. So Nanette was able to touch on some of the pathways to homelessness. And what I want to talk about is what that looks like for Trail. How does it directly affect Trail? So with our first stat on the left-hand side, we're looking at about 45 active homelessness case files. And so what that means is that would include individuals currently accessing shelter services, for example. Could touch on individuals who are precariously housed, such as sleeping on a friend's sofa, sleeping in their car. And it also includes those individuals that CDS's outreach team supports in the community. So those individuals who are in tents, for example. So a key point of this is that Trail does not have any other shelter spaces for people experiencing homelessness in the community. So without the Lenina shelter, there is nowhere else to go for individuals to have an overnight stay in the community. Next slide, Tyler. So what are we doing to address homelessness in Trail? So the first bubble on the left-hand side, we worked with CDS to expand the La Nina shelter to 24/7 operation in 2020. And then a year later in 2021, we also increased those number of beds from 9 until 8 to 18. And that just relates back to what Nanette had touched on in terms of the increasing need from COVID, from individuals losing their employment, from inflation, increasing costs, increasing rental affordability. The next bubble there, we worked with CDS to create outreach positions in the community. And those outreach positions specifically support individuals, vulnerable individuals in the community and surrounding businesses. And I will say that outreach is unique to Trail. BC Housing does not fund outreach services in every community. And so it is a really important piece of this puzzle to really connect with folks who are on the street, support them in reaching out to Interior Health, MSDPR, additional community resources for them to really, continue on their housing journey and their goals. So in that third bubble there is collaborating with the city to identify a site for shelter relocation. So we are very aware that the current La Nina shelter is not ideal for the community, for businesses. And so that is an ongoing search that we're doing to connect with BC Housing's real estate department, development operations, and collaborating with the city to find a better location. Next slide there, Tyler. So about the current temporary shelter. As we've heard from a couple of the stats in this presentation, the need in Trail greatly outweighs the capacity available at the current shelter. So we are currently looking at supporting 18 guests overnight and 40 additional people for support services. So again, those referrals and connections to Interior Health, to MSDPR, supporting folks with rental applications or employment applications, things like that. At La Nina, guests are provided breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as laundry and hygiene services are available. And that is a really key piece in terms of folks reaching their housing and employment goals, to have those laundry and hygiene services available at the shelter. CDS also provides a variety of other things like appropriate clothing. We have seen an increase in really cold temperatures and really warm temperatures, specifically in the interior. And so CDS is able to provide those supports for folks who really need it. And that last piece there, on average, more than 445 meals are served each month to people in the community, which is huge. Next slide, Tyler. I'm going to pass this next slide over to Douglas.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you all for having us here tonight. So I'm just going to speak briefly on the actual modular units. We have the ability to have quite an efficient construction methodology with modular units. They are units that can be reused and reinstalled in different locations over time. So they're used for a short period of time and then they can be moved on. Most often, they're used in work camp locations, and then sometimes we acquire those for shelter locations like this. So the great thing about the modular construction is it is very efficient to build and quick to install on a site. And given our timelines to the September deadline for La Nina shelter downtown, this would be an ideal option for us to pursue. The other thing with the difference with this new structure at the site would allow for some central amenities in the building, surrounded by the sleeping units, and individuals will have a shared room often, but then be able to use the central amenities, kitchen and lounge, and some outdoor amenity space as well. So Tyler, maybe next slide. Now you'll see here, this is the floor plan layout of one of the buildings that we have an option on for this site. And it's made up of 5 long modulars units. And you can see this central amenity there, sort of spaces 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the lounge, sort of common shared spaces for washrooms and showers and laundry. And then our commercial kitchen is number 5, and number 6 would be our dining hall. Number 2 is where the red area there is where the entry and office space would be for a on-site staff worker or 2. And then we have surrounding that, all the 1 areas are the sleeping units, and you'll see that most of them there have a double bed, and so that adds up to our 18 that we're looking at for this location. And then the other spaces there are really just mechanical and storage pantry. So next slide. So this is the site, an aerial photo. As we can see, the residential house to the left of the site, the embankment to the rear of the property, which a lot of the parcel is taken up by at the rear. We have the culvert we're aware of as well on this site, and then the pullout area to the right of the site as well there. And I think we haven't yet located the building or looked at what it would look like on site, but generally our thoughts are that we would try and tuck the building and outdoor amenity space towards the pullout section to the right, and allow a bit of a drive aisle barrier between that and the residential house on the left there. Next slide. Thanks. So these are just some site photos, which people are probably fairly familiar, but you can see the little letdown there between the house and which could create a bit of a separation between the fenced off amenity area and the modular units. And yeah, and then we could go to the next slide there. So these are what some of the units look like just as they've been sited, just when they have been sited on a temporary modular site. You can see the entry construction there, and all the units have been refurbished, repainted, and they would be up on a temporary foundation and then skirted with material around the outside. You can see in photo 1 there, we have some outdoor structures as well, gazebos, that would begin to program the outdoor space. And next slide there, Tyler. And then these are just some fencing options we've looked at for numerous other sites. The chain link fence there in photo 2 is somewhat typical with the screening slats in that, and then what we're looking at for this site, probably more of a higher 6-foot wood panel fence to screen the site, or there's also a bit more of a decorative feature fence on the lower number 3 there. So there's options there that we're exploring. And then next slide. So these are some of the things we do at a number of our other sites where we have raised planter boxes and crushed gravel to be able to create, as part of that, the gazebo you saw there as well, to have an outdoor landscape area planting where tenants can use that space with to grow things in their garden. And then next slide, and we'll pass it back to Nanette, I think, or Rachel.
I'm going to jump in for the safety and security measures slide. Thanks, Douglas. So safety and security, it's a hot topic in all of our communities. and it really is a priority for BC Housing. So our goal is always to create a safe space within and around the shelter, and there's a couple of key pieces that feed into that goal. One of those is experienced staff who participate in ongoing training. So training might include things outside of the organization, like first aid, for example. Also might include trainings offered by BC Housing. So nonviolent crisis intervention training, for example, helps to support staff to understand how to de-escalate certain situations with the population that we serve. So that is a key piece. Alongside that, 24/7 staffing support always available at the shelter. At minimum, we'll have 2 people always there to support guests who are accessing the shelter, to also answer the phone for community members, local businesses, neighbors, etc., who may have concerns, complaints, issues that they want to bring up. And so there's always somebody at the shelter to field those concerns. Another piece just around the premise is fencing, for example. So Douglas had those nice photos on the other slide of some options for fencing available, but that really provides privacy and privacy both for the guests, but also for the community. And so that, alongside lighting and security cameras, is really important for staff to be able to be aware of what's happening on site and to be able to deal with it quickly. So a third piece of that really is our services and outreach team. We touched on that previously, and that outreach team is really important for the community. Some of the things that they do is, again, connecting with local businesses in the area, neighbors, conducting wellness checks for individuals in the community, providing referrals or supports to community programs, and also cleaning up debris, needles on the ground, etc. So that is a few pieces of those puzzles to really ensure that safety and security measures are taken seriously. Next slide, Tyler. Thanks. Part of safety and security is really also being a good neighbor, is to be connecting with our local businesses, our neighbors, and working together to really address concerns and proactively create unique solutions depending on the situation. So on the right-hand side, you see the who to call, when to call. So we work with CDS to create these for their outreach team to hand out. And so it really gives their neighbors and local businesses a better idea of who to call, when to call, when they're experiencing a issue, concern, question on site. So we have things like police, fire, bylaw, and shelter down at the bottom there about any issues or concerns about individuals' behavior, health, safety, or welfare on or near the property. And then we always have that contact information to ensure that we're able to respond in a timely fashion. Next slide, Tyler. So CDS success stories. We always want to touch on some really amazing work that the staff are doing in the community that isn't always publicized elsewhere. So that first point there, more than 10 individuals have been supported by shelter staff to reconnect with substance supports and to get on their recovery journey. 6 individuals with long-term homeless challenges obtained rental units in the community and set up long-term supports to maintain those housing. And so they're not coming back within the to access the shelter. They have long-term housing available for them to continue to really improve and gain in any of their employment goals or any other goals that they may have. Assisted 4 individuals from other communities outside the Kootenays that presented to the shelter to return home where they have those active support systems in place. And so that is a really key piece, that if individuals find themselves in Trail, but it is not where they want to stay and they are looking to go home, CDS staff supports them in accessing those services to get them to their home communities. And that last piece, more than 20 individuals from the shelter have been employed, receiving a paid wage through an employment program offered at CDS. So we often think of a housing first model where individuals, once they have that stability of having a safe, secure, stable home, that's when they really gain that that space in their lives where they can work on those employment goals moving forward, which really helps them secure permanent long-term housing in the future. Next slide, Tyler. And I'll pass this off to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. So this is where we're just wrapping up now. Today, council has an important decision on shelter services in front of it. The current shelter downtown was extended for 1 year from September of last year to September of this year. Since the last council direction, we've been working over the next, about 5 months to get to the point today of coming back to council with this formal request for a temporary use permit on the new site. During those 5 months, we have met with the city, including meeting with council to update them on our progress on this new site. Delivering a shelter within this timeline really depends on working closely with our partners, including most importantly the city, to make sure that we can deliver this within a year. It really won't happen without working closely with the city. If council chooses not to approve the temporary use permit on Rossland Avenue, it would put the shelter services in Trail at risk, as well as all of the outreach work that Rachel described that isn't serving just the 18 people who are accessing the shelter at any given time. The shelter services would continue in the current location until September, but even in that time, we know that the operations at the current location are not ideal. There's no outside space like Douglas described there will be in the new site, and people are utilizing the public streets and alleys, to hang out during the day. If council doesn't approve this today, it's not certain that we would be able to identify and operationalize an alternate site before the temporary use permit expires in September. If after that time we haven't found another site, Trail would be without shelter services. The individuals accessing the services in the shelter, the 18 beds, would have nowhere to go. And the people who are accessing supports in the community, like Rachel mentioned, people living in their cars or who might be spending time on someone's couch for a night, the support services they access in the shelter would also come to an end. The alternate is that council approves this temporary site today. The shelter services would be relocated out of the downtown area as council previously directed. The new site would be operational likely within a few months and certainly before the September deadline that we have. Over that time, we would continue to work with the city and really make an effort to outreach to the neighbors who are going to be next to the future site to talk about the design, the fence, the operations, and try and talk about what some impacts people might expect and how we can try to offset those through some of the decisions we make before it opens. When it's open, the shelter will have more space inside. It'll have, rooms for people. Right now, the sleeping situation in the current shelter is, a room with multiple beds in it. It will be a better service provided to people who are accessing it. And there'll be more space that's not dedicated to sleeping inside. And the biggest difference between the proposed site and the downtown site is this outside space, so that people don't have to leave the shelter grounds during the day if they don't want to. If they choose to stay within the shelter grounds, the yard that Douglas described, there'll be 24/7 supervision from CDS staff. People will have access to the harm reduction supplies that Rachel mentioned, and some of the community impacts that we're seeing downtown right now, we would expect those to decrease because people will have somewhere else to go during the day. So those really are the two decisions that council and the community faces today. I just have one further closing point to make, that the shelter we're talking about today exists on a continuum or a spectrum or an ecosystem of housing options that every community needs so that people can find stable and secure housing. Nanette talked about some of the pathways to homelessness. People don't just end up homeless in trail. They are falling out of market housing, out of social housing that, it may or may not exist in trail. And what BC Housing is doing, again, working closely with the city and other nonprofit housing providers in trail and in the area, is delivering these other forms of housing so that fewer and fewer people are accessing the shelter. If we can build, we are continuing to look for a permanent site for supportive housing. The fact that we're delivering this temporary solution doesn't change that. We're continuing to look for that site and trail. When we do, we will start construction, and that will alleviate, some of the pressures that the shelter is seeing. And at the same time, though, we're looking at building more social housing, affordable housing for people who simply can't afford to rent a place anymore in trail. As well, BC Housing has programs to deliver lower end of market and market rental units as well, to ensure that there's really the whole variety of housing that people need to find an affordable home. So that is the end of our presentation. I will return the controls, if I can figure it out, to council, and happy to, we'll stay on, and any questions that council directs to us, we're happy to speak to. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, BC Housing, for that presentation. I think at this time, I will open it up to council for any questions to BC Housing. And who wants to start first? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. For BC Housing, through the mayor. We have had, we've been in talks, obviously, regarding the temporary shelter, and I'm in support of a shelter being temporary and permanent. But there was concern with some of the previous thought of properties may have been in a floodplain throughout the city. Like, will BC Housing look at maybe some future, as we move forward here, will BC Housing, will you guys be able to think about, like, there's the Columbia River Treaty is what I'm going to get at. I'm just not going to beat around the bush anymore. And the Columbia River Treaty is an agreement between BC, or in Canada, and the United States, which controls the river, the levels of the Columbia River. Recent floods in the city of Trail have come from Gorge Creek and Trail Creek, not from the Columbia River. Would you guys consider other properties knowing more about the Columbia River Treaty and the control they have over the levels of the Columbia River?
We won't rule out any site. We're happy to look at the sites that might be available for a temporary shelter or a permanent shelter. And yeah, looking at the risks for flooding or other environmental risks is part of the consideration that we would do for any site.
Any other councillors? Questions?
Yes, Your Worship, I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So prior to coming here, I reviewed the shelter design guidelines dated September 2017. Is that still an applicable document for BC Housing?
Those are the guidelines that we use when we're constructing permanent housing, and we try to adhere to them as closely as we can when we're building these temporary modular sites as well, recognizing that the structure comes pre-assembled, so we're working within a structure that can only change so much.
If I can just quote 2.1 needs analysis, it says to support the proposition of a new or renovated shelter, an analysis should be undertaken to determine the client's groups to be served and ensure their needs are fully understood. Where possible, the analysis should identify current and future needs the required scale of the project and the exact location to provide the service. I'd like to just zero in on current and future needs. Has there been an analysis or any documentation or data that you can provide us this evening on that type of analysis? Did the question get through?
Yeah, I'm just, sorry, it's Nanette. I'm
Oh.
just trying to, so when you think about shelter needs, I mean, for the current, one of the primary things that we're seeing in this particular iteration of the temporary use downtown is that there is no access to outdoor space. There's no access to really any internal space. It's very close quarters with beds. There's very little programming space. There's very little space for people to come in and actually connect in a really authentic way with folks. And so that creates challenges when you're running shelter services. The whole point of shelters is to create a connection and to have ongoing connections with the shelter community. So people feel like they can trust enough to move forward in their recovery journey, whatever that looks like for them. This particular modular environment, we have it in 3 separate cities in the interior region. And what we've noticed is a real change in how shelter guests interact with one another and with shelter staff. There's a real change in terms of the conflicts. People have access to their own space. There's way more dignity given to people when they have privacy, and they can have a little bit of control. When people are homeless, they have no control. This gives them that small measure of control. And what happens is they actually end up engaging. And so in the communities where we have these very similar modular projects, we are seeing so many people access long-term housing with very minimal supports, which is, quite interesting how quickly that has, just the environment has spurred them to actually be able to connect enough to get into market housing and be successful in that market housing. And we've been able to sort of chronicle that over 12 months, and we've seen it. They haven't cycled back into homelessness. And we also see it in terms of the violence and the conflicts. Some of our shelters are powder kegs because of the close quarters people have and the opportunities for aggression and violence. But in this kind of environment, you don't have that. People have space. When people have space, they can calm down, and the shelter staff can use all of their skills around de-escalation to actually make a difference. And so that's why this particular, and we're talking about the modular benefits, Douglas talked a little bit, but we do have the experience in these 3 communities to be able to say that it is meeting the needs in a fairly profound way.
If I may address your comments, I'm not sure if you answered my question on future needs analysis, because I anticipate that the need for more sheltering may occur. And I'll just address the current demand. Currently, there's 18 beds available at El Nina. The proposed site involving these 5 modular trailers will include 18 beds. So we're basically comparable to where we're at now. When I've got an email here from Sheila Adcock dated January 24th, and this is something that I'm sure that you're aware of, that they have 20 to 25 individuals showing up currently. So by my simple analysis, the proposed site won't even meet current demand, let alone what we might project to be future housing needs. Do you have any comment on that, or any? Is there any, like, what can you? How can we address the current needs at this shelter? And if there's a demand for further capacity, which I anticipate there will be, how do we address that? Thank you.
That's a great question, Nick, and I can jump in to hopefully answer it for you. So yes, that modular operation model has 5 of those modulars kind of stacked within each other. And so 18 is the typical number we would see utilized in that model because of the number of beds. And so we are able to increase those numbers of folks accessing overnight shelter services by having additional bunk beds in certain units, by having cots and mattresses available during the extreme cold and heat, cold snaps and heat warnings that we have in the summer. And so we are able to increase that number to bring about 20, 25 folks in. And during those special weather events, have those mountain cots available as well. So 18 would just be the base point.
So with bunk beds and mats, you can bring it up to 25. Does that pose any, you talked to earlier, Mr. Ball mentioned the powder keg. My concern would be when you have an overcapacity, that there is a risk, a safety risk, to make that point known. Another question that I have, and maybe this isn't the right forum to ask it, but what population base or what analytics are you using to determine our needs here in Trail? And I say this because I believe that our shelter is a regional service. I think it takes in 5 municipalities, Area A, Area B of our regional district. So it provides more than just Trail. And I'm wondering if your file reflects that kind of a population base.
I think what we're seeing in the Kootenays and much like everywhere in the interior region is that people are becoming homeless every single day. And so we can't keep up. And that's the reality of it. And with the environment the way it is in terms of the economy, we expect homelessness will continue to be on the rise. And so all we can do is for this site is put what we can fit there and continue to look for permanent sites and build more housing. We just don't have enough of it.
Okay.
We do recognize.
No, I'm sorry.
And just for the regional part of it, I mean, we've never had a shelter in Castlegar before, and now we have 13 beds. We've never had, prior to COVID, we've never had a shelter in Grand Forks either. We've never in Nelson, we actually housed 30 people during COVID in a motel that we subsequently purchased. So we recognize the regional impacts of not building solutions in each community. And that's why we've tried in Trail to build something because we've seen something so big. And that's why we went for the temporary use permit initially to expand their basement. It's not ideal, but we were just trying to respond because we recognize that it is a regional resource and we're very aware of that.
Thank you. Was there a site survey done at this location on Roslyn Avenue to determine if it could hold a permanent supportive housing facility?
Yeah, I can speak to that. With this site, there are some unfortunate challenges with the existing culvert that runs through the majority of the site and at the back towards the embankment. And we did, so for our temporary site structure, it will be a little easier to solve because we can, our structural engineers said, that we could span across that culvert and create load points where we can sort of step over it in a way. So that does pose a problem for a permanent structure there. And we did look about the size as well. And it's not really conducive to the size of a permanent building, because as we're talking about here, the numbers are, fluctuating from 18, as you say, to 25. We feel like the need for something that's permanent would be, at that scale or even slightly larger. And so to fit that on this site it's not conducive to that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Don't want to steal the show here, but I do have some questions. If I can carry on, Your Worship. Just want to talk about, I guess 4.7 in the shelter design guidelines talks about, and I'm not able to access it on my computer, so I had to do a hard copy here. It will be important to demonstrate that the proposed shelter will be designed to be a good neighbor it will be equally important to commit to operational protocols that will meet this objective, such as communication protocols, regular meetings with neighbors, and monitoring and maintenance of the public areas immediately adjacent to the shelter. You've kind of touched on this already with what you plan to do, but up until the point, my understanding, last September of 2022, this site was presented to you by city staff and perhaps council at the time as a recommended site for this proposal. Since September of 2022, up until the issuance of this permit, was there any discussion, any neighborhood consultation with any of the neighbors? If I can ask that question to BC Housing. Thank you.
I can speak to that. It's been a very quick process, very accelerated. Agreed. So from what we would typically do and the level of outreach we would have with the neighbors. So what we are 100% committed to do is as we are finalizing the design, to work with the neighbors to confirm and agree on a communication plan. And like I mentioned, there might be aspects of the design that can be accommodated, that can accommodate some neighbors' concerns. People who are immediately adjacent. We will think about how we integrate or how we design so that we can deal with that most appropriately. We have a few months to do that. Again, that's very quick. But the reason we're moving quickly is because of council's previous direction for us to have something ready to go within a year. And Rachel also spoke to some of the standard practices we have, which are in place regardless of how quickly we're moving. The who to call, when to call, which is circulated widely in the area so that everybody knows who to contact with what kind of problem. Whether it's BC Housing or the operator or the RCMP, depending on what situation it is. So that's always in place.
So just further to that, do you have any information or discussion notes on your file regarding the impact that this proposed shelter will have on neighboring properties? And I pay particular attention to the property, the residents at 565 Roslyn Avenue, which looks like to me will be within 10 meters of this proposed site. Which property value, do you guys discuss or are you concerned with, or do you have any notes reflecting the impact that this shelter will have on neighboring property values?
Property values? Is that the question?
Yes. Mrs. Walls lives at 565 Roslyn Avenue. She's not able to be here tonight. She's ill. So she's concerned that her property value will be greatly, severely impacted by the shelter, which will be like 10 meters from her residence. Is that something that you guys address when you look at these things, these proposals?
No, that we don't have any information on that, although I will note that this is a temporary structure. We're asking for a permit for 2 years. So it's within council's discretion to set the term limit beyond the 3 years. So there wouldn't be any long-term impact from that.
So I'm getting through this. I appreciate your indulgence. Another point is just traffic flow. Do you have any data or any traffic statistics on Highway 22 at this part of the Gulch concerning traffic flow? And I say that because the proposed shelter will be built on the north side of Highway 22, which means that all guests and visitors, which could be up to 70, 80 people a day, will have to cross the highway. And I'm just wondering if you have any data on traffic flow in that area.
Certainly, we're aware. We've in the communications we've had that's a high traffic area. So that's one of the important things that we'll be working on in the coming months. With obviously any changes to the road will have to be done with the city or the appropriate authorities to do anything with that. But safety for the drivers on the road, for the people on the sidewalk is very important in the design decisions we're making.
And you may want to just make a note in your file. I did make a couple of calls, spoke to one trucking company. There's several trucking companies that use Highway 22 on a regular basis. One is over 80 80 trips a day with one carrier. And the estimate was over 300, which I was shocked by, actually. Over 300 tractor trailers per day travel that highway, that corridor. If I can just talk a little bit about the outdoor area, because there wasn't many dimensions given. There's not a lot of information given on the outdoor area, which I believe obviously is very important for our shelter. Do you have the size or dimensions, or was that given and I just missed it?
Again, that's kind of where we're just at that stage of citing the unit in the space, deciding where the fence would go. So we don't have the site plan 100% confirmed yet.
So you have no idea how big,
sorry, go ahead.
you have no idea then how big the outdoor area will be?
We've done some preliminary sort of footprint of the modular units, because we have the scale of those that we've put an option on, but we haven't, as Tyler is saying, we haven't done all the site planning yet, because we're not at that stage. We're sort of at this stage, I guess.
But there's a good portion of the site that is going to be open,
yes,
and with space. So there's ample space for trucks to come for deliveries, to have the outside space, to have the covered area that Douglas kind of showed there, and to have separation distance from the immediate neighbors. So the initial sketches we have, there's more than enough space to accommodate all of those things.
Trucks coming and deliveries coming is nice, but what about for shopping buggies and bicycles and storage? Is it going to be large enough to accommodate that? Because that's a real demand here in this city.
Yeah, that's a consideration as well. Typically, we have some sort of enclosed outdoor storage for those kinds of things, but we'll be working on those details in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much.
And I move on to other councillors that might have questions, please.
Absolutely, Your Worship. Perfect timing.
Yeah. Councillor,
Well, I had a question, but Nick took it. But what I was gonna ask is regarding the traffic flow. And to the 4 folks that we have here from BC Housing, have you guys come to Trail yet to view this location?
Yes, we did one site visit, and again, as we're working on the design, we'll be sure to be there again to take another look at it more carefully as we're making some decisions about what goes where.
And then just to touch on what Councilor Cashel was talking about, there's in my opinion, a large safety concern, because this is actually a highway. We call it Roslyn Avenue, but it's a highway, and it's at one of the busier streets coming and going into Trail. What safety concerns or what sort of safety measures can you take to also protect the drivers of the road, but also the users of the shelter?
I mean, part of it is, we probably have very limited control over, putting in a new crosswalk or something, but a lot of it will be about, Nanette kind of talked about this as well. A connection with the shelter guests to, talk about what kind of, how to access the shelter, which route to take into the shelter, where to cross the street with if you have a cart or something, to get to the site safely. So that's really what we would be working. We'd be happy to have a conversation with the city if there's any improvements to the actual road that can be done. But probably that for this short-term basis, we would be really looking at just making sure that people can get in and out safely.
Just come to the Trail and have a look.
That's it for questions.
That's everything. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hanson.
So I have worked with development permits in the past, and normally for getting approval for a development permit of any sort on a main artery, that there has to be an approval from the Ministry of Transportation. Has that been investigated or started yet?
We'll work through that after today, once council grants.
Okay, I have another question. So what size are the trailers for the site plan?
Douglas, do you have the?
I don't on hand have the exact dimensions. I believe the whole modular, all 5 together are about, I believe it's about 60 foot by 60 foot square. So.
So I see that there's 4 exits and entrances from what you've provided to us. Now, what kind of security are you going to have? So I understand the shelter now currently has specific times that you can come and go, but with 4 entrances and exits, how are you going to secure those?
I might turn that over to one of my operations colleagues who might be able to talk about how one of the other structure.
So what we've done in the past is just try to create opportunities for just to funnel people into certain ways, because we recognize that we don't want to be looking at a bunch of different entrances and exits, because it has an impact on our ability to actually see everything. And sure, we have security cameras everywhere, but we also have to have someone reviewing the security cameras. So in the past, what we've done is just tried to create opportunities for people to funnel them towards, certain areas, so that we weren't always exiting out, just creating more control of the space within the confines of the shelter environment.
Yeah, just to be clear, all of the entrances and exits of the structure are within the property, the fenced property that Douglas described.
Okay, thank you. I actually just have a couple of quick questions and comments. And I don't know if you can see the amount of people that are here tonight. We have, I would say, probably between these 2 rooms, I'm looking or thinking there's 150 people. Online, we have 114 people. And that is very, probably about the same amount of emails and phone calls that we have all received as council. I just want to talk to you about the safety for the children. I think that we've hit just about every other avenue here, or aspect of it. I really want to talk to you about the safety of the children going to school and coming home from school. Now, I heard from a lot of families that they're very concerned about what's going to happen around the bus stop that is across from the shelter. And in the park at the Colombo Lodge at the Piazza. Also, they're concerned about, of course, the highway speed. But I want to speak also on behalf of the businesses that are concerned about their businesses, their small businesses. They've been doing a lot of work in the Gulch to improve them and entice people to come shopping there. I guess what I want to ask BC Housing is there any extra security or safety conditions that BC Housing can bring to this area with the temporary use permit?
So I can speak to that, and currently what we have at the shelter downtown is we have 2 people going out into community from 8 to 8, really being there to interact with businesses, to deal with any issues that come up, and just be eyes and ears, move people along, interface with our CMP bylaw, whatever that looks like. And that was a condition of the previous temporary use permit. So I would expect that if that was something that mayor and council wanted, that is perfectly reasonable. And as I say, it's something that we've done since the beginning of providing shelter services at this location. So we recognize the concerns that people have, and as Rachel and I think Tyler talked about, we have shelters embedded in business, in residential and commercial, and our whole goal is around being good neighbors and really educating our shelter guests, making sure that it's part of the culture at the shelter, and lots of reminders from shelter staff and lots of community outreach. So shelter staff going to businesses, having that ongoing conversation, making sure that there's a relationship there so they know who to call. Because once you have that relationship, it's really a lot easier to resolve issues that do come up. And so that's what we've been relying on in terms of our shelters. And we always have neighbors with our shelters. And more times than not, we've been able to make it work based on relationships. And so that's what I anticipate us continuing to do here. And if that's a condition of the temporary use permit, we'll absolutely accept that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, excuse me, Benson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just piggybacking off that, Nanette, the current shelter's temporary use permit, with the condition of the security, and also piggybacking off of Councillor Cashwell's questions regarding being a good neighbor and communicating with our, with the businesses around us. What information do you have in terms of metrics of has this improved the area around the current shelter since the temporary use permit was extended for a year?
I can speak to what the shelter operator has responded to. And in that response, it has to have been a benefit to the businesses that relied on the shelter to clean up, to move people along, to deal with some of that interface that, to be honest, are often not shelter guests. They're people who are homeless in community that maybe aren't shelter guests, but the shelter operator is doing their best to connect with people and talk to them about resources that might be in community and try and help them to move them along. And so from that perspective, I think there's been a tremendous amount of work done in the downtown. The fact is that you have a shelter without any outdoor space. So when people want to go outside, they go in front of the businesses. And so nobody can kind of move them along. I mean, the shelter operator doesn't have jurisdiction to move people along. They can certainly try through their powers of persuasion and do all of that, but it's very difficult. So I don't know. You may hear downtown businesses that say no, it's actually been worse, and you may hear some that say, yeah, we really received great service. We've heard it both ways, and so I think it's just your perspective.
Thank you. Councillor, any other questions before we move on? We still have interior health to present. Okay, then I'll ask Jane Power, if she's still on the line, if she'd like to present, please, or speak.
Thank you, Your Worship, City Councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. IH has emailed to you as well a supporting and more detailed letter from Dr. Sue Pollock, IH Chief Medical Health Officer, Melissa Klein, IH Community Health Facilitator, and from me as well, Jane Power, Director of Clinical Operations. IH supports BC Housing's temporary use permit, which allows for the construction and operation of a temporary homeless shelter in Trail on city property. The need for the continuance of support for Trail's vulnerable street population through a temporary shelter and outside the city core was identified and discussed last autumn. This temporary shelter is the first in the pursuit of a permanent, this temporary shelter is the first step in the pursuit of a permanent shelter location in Trail. While transition to a permanent location sparks challenges, it is still a move in the right direction. This temporary shelter will have the capacity to provide safe and stable accommodations to people experiencing homelessness in the city of Trail and addresses many of the concerns that were brought forward 5 months ago. The land is now identified and available, and by many measures, this is a better option than the current state, which we all agree should change. IH offers services within the shelter, including substance use services and counseling services, wound care, treatment services, support services, recovery services, opioid agonist services and treatment, And that team is comprised of a nurse practitioner, an outreach RN, nurse prescribers, and outreach workers who you may have seen in the downtown core. We have crisis intervention and crisis response nurses. We offer transportation to appointments and other services. We have adult case management, and we have connection workers. IH will continue to offer robust services to the shelter guests and to work with CDS and our partners at BC Housing as they provide food and shelter services, essential services to Trail's homeless population. On behalf of IH, I encourage your support of this temporary use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay,
Can I ask a question?
any questions for Interior Health?
I just have one, Your Worship. Yes, Ms. Power, thank you. Recently, I attended a forum for the Trail Community Action Committee, and they outlined two gaps in services. One, lack of or no supportive housing. And the second one was there's no safe consumption site in Trail. And I'm just wondering if you've had an opportunity over these last few months to connect with our partners at BC Housing to maybe come together and put a safe consumption site at a shelter. Have you had any dialogue or any discussions around that, or do you even see the need for such a site here in Trail? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. There's been a lot of discussion around safe consumption in Trail. It is a decision that would come from the Ministry of Health and a direction to Interior Health to take a look at that for our community. We're certainly always open to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Health of Mental Health and Substance Use for direction on these issues. And of course, we would comply with their request. So currently, no, we've not described that with BC. We've not discussed that with BC Housing, but we would certainly be open to a request like that. And there's not one on the table right now, but I hope that helps you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to, oh, sorry, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Scar. How many days and times are these supports staff available to the shelter guests?
The vast majority of our services are offered Monday to Friday, and we also have crisis response that is available. Crisis response nurses, RNs who are available on the weekends, and should the shelter phone and they go down in response. They are community positions, and so they respond to community. They also spend part of their time in KBRH's emergency department.
And further to that, so is that the only mental health people that you have on site?
Sorry, we have support services in the Trail shelter every single day of the week.
Including mental health, though, right?
Oh, yes, these are all mental health services that I listed, yes.
Councillor Martin.
One more question for BC Housing, please. You commented about security 8 to 8. I'm just trying to confirm if that's 24/7, is it 8 in the morning to 8 at night and through the night to the morning? Can you clarify that, please?
I can speak to that. 8 to 8 is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So just during those daytime hours. Typically that's because safety concerns, but also to support the businesses that make those calls and requests for the outreach team to provide support is really during those operating business hours, rather than, when the businesses are closed at 6 or 8 p.m.
Did I also Hanson, one more?
Yes, sorry, I just want to further to that question. So the 8 to 8 is for outreach, or 8 to 8 is for security? Because there's kind of an overlap, and I'd really like to clarify that. If it's two separate things, that you have security on site at the shelter from 8 to 8, or if there's outreach only from 8 to 8.
So our outreach is security outreach. So they present kind of as both. They provide outreach services, but also operate and walk around the perimeter to do safety checks, to ensure that there are folks accessing services when they need it. Regarding security, we don't have security individuals on site. We do have security cameras. We do have, connection with Selkirk Security to also do security camera monitoring, that kind of thing. So they are not two different separate positions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the public question period. Before we get started, I want to ask you all that we have a respectful conversation right now tonight. I don't want to hear any rude comments, any laughing or joking with the speakers, please. Just want to remind everyone, when you step up to the podium, please state your name and your address. And we are going to actually limit the speaker time to 3 minutes, please. We have a lot of people that want to speak tonight, so. Okay. So first up, I believe is, yeah, right.
My name is Greta Sweden-Henriksen. I live at 1170 Tamarack Avenue. If anybody wants to know, it's at the top of the stairs that go from Tamarack down to the 7-Eleven. I did write out what I want to say, but I didn't realize nobody was busy. So I'll try and be really quick. So once the 7-Eleven opened in May of last year, we had all the homeless people moving into the stairwell in front of my house. They were there for about the next, ever since then. They keep us awake at night. They party all night, and then they pass out in the stairwell during the day. Last year, I contacted the city works department, the mayor, and by emails, phone calls, visits to the office, and we got absolutely no help. They started to expand past the stairwell onto our properties, and they were making trails through my property. They were trying to build shelters on my property. I tried building a fence. They ripped it out 5 times. I tried putting shrubs in to block them. They ripped all my shrubs out. It's still happening. They were down there the other day trying to build a shelter on the corner of my property. So, So then we and I think what was really disheartening over it all was that the shelter workers were telling people that it was public property and they could stay there and that they didn't have to move, which is really disheartening because when you get 8 or 10 people doing drugs and passing out on the stairwell and you can't move them because we've been told by the shelter staff that they can be there. I contacted the people at the community action team and I was told that they can stay there because if they need some place to party so they can drink and do drugs, and downtown on the stairwell is the place for them to go. So yeah, so that was another problem. Finally, it was near probably September, October, the bylaw officer finally came out because I couldn't even move my car because they had all the junk behind my car. And he came and he said, well, this is not my job. It's not part of the city bylaw for me to remove them. It's a matter for the RCMP because they're blocking the exits or the access for people. So he said, what you should do is go out with your cell phone and tell the people that you're going to call the police, and because they're involved with the police, they'll all leave. Well, for the next few months, all I took was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of swearing, a lot of calling me names. So that's been happening probably up until the fall. And in the fall, we got a new mayor and council, and finally the works department came out and they started fixing some of the stairwell, and it's been a long night. So the stairs. So I'm going to thank David Moorhead, because in the fall he came out. We had a group of men that were living in the stairs overnight, and you know when the bears come through, I'm on the path the bears come in the spring and the fall. Oh, sorry about that. Oh God. Maybe I'll write this down and send it to you.
Thank
You're
you.
doing it,
Yeah. So anyways,
Sorry, Greta, your time's up.
but can I at least say what I would like to have done?
You know what, we have other speakers in the room and we're trying to keep it to the temporary use permit.
Okay, but.
Okay, conversation please, if we could.
Yeah, but I asked 2 weeks ago to come and speak on this, so. Okay, well, and as your question about property taxes, I put my house up for sale last year. I can't sell because people come and they see the people passed out on the stairwell or doing drugs. Nobody wants to buy my house.
Thank you, Greta. Thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
So please, if we could just keep the discussion to the temporary use permit, please. Gail, are you up next?
Dale Detzler, 908 Roslyn Avenue. I'm here to address a few things which I didn't expect to, but giving the answers that councillors Cashel, Hanson, Mayor Jones, and Benson, and Wilson got. I think it's appalling that BC Housing and Interior Health come to this and tell you that you have to accept something when they obviously haven't done their own homework. The answers that you got. So the temporary, that is what the temporary use, right?
Okay.
They're telling you that you have to accept a temporary use shelter when they haven't come with. Anyway, I wasn't expecting to actually comment on that. What I want to ask is, I mean, I know that I would expect that the mayor, the councillors, they all have our best hearted interests, citizens of Trail, and that they want to be transparent. And so there's a couple of things that I'd like to ask to be done. First and foremost, I would like to get a yes or no on demanding from Interior Health and from BC Housing to give you guys the data so that you can do a risk benefit analysis on this. I mean, you're asking us to do stuff that's going to destroy this town potentially. I think it is. It's my opinion, sorry. But I mean, if we look at risk benefit and you know, as far as risk goes, you know, this matter's been dealt with. I wasn't prepared for this 3.5 thing, but fundamentally, you know, the RCMP can answer this. I mean, in this, the Vancouver City Police have, in their situation, I mean, they've looked at comparing average rates between 2017 to 19. You know, what's the 2022 crime rate for percent robberies, percent assaults against police officers, percent assaults?
Gail, please. We got your email about the county.
Okay, so I didn't get a response, so I'm not sure.
And we actually, you know what, we haven't had the opportunity.
Okay, so you've received it and you're addressing it, fantastic.
So we have received your email.
Okay, fantastic. So I'd like to know what the risks are, but then what's the benefits? I mean, where are the benefits of this coming from? Like, we don't have any numbers. I want to know, okay, how much is it costing us as taxpayers to have this facility? Where's the money being spent? And why does it have to be, why isn't it not transparent? You know, what was it for 2019, 20, 21, and 22? And then a cost breakdown of where that money's going to. They talk about mental health and health. You know, I don't know where they're drawing this data from or what, they never come and tell us where they're drawing their data from. I don't think they have the data. The fact is, if you look at this in detail, the fundamental thing is mental health, which leads to drug addiction, which then leads to homelessness. So why can't we get some data on this and do a risk benefit analysis? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're here to talk about the temporary use permit, please. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Daniel Langford. I live at 413 Belfast Avenue. And one of my main concerns is Trail has always struggled with their reputation and stuff like that. And at one of our main entrances into the city, we're now going to put in a temporary shelter. I have empathy for these people, I do. The description that BC Housing gives of the homeless people that are seniors and stuff like that, I understand it. But we're all here, I'm sure, is we're talking about the people that when you drive by Bank Montreal, you look down the alleyways, all the people that you see there are going to be moving down there. And the Columbo Loft is across the street with a beautiful park they've made. And it is going to become a hangout. And the thing is you're giving them a temporary permit for 3 years with the option to renew that. Now, my question to BC Housing is, how many months do you need to do a permanent situation? Because why do we need 3 years and then another 3-year term? I could see it's gonna be 1 year and then we're gonna have a permanent place. And I have a feeling this will turn into a permanent place. And that is a school bus stop for school kids. And there's tons of young families in the area. And it's just, I think council needs to really, for the enhancement of our community, that's the wrong place. It's definitely the wrong place.
John, are you up next?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for providing this opportunity to be able to speak. And I'm going to be, my name is Jan Morton, and I'm going to be speaking in support of the proposed resolution to authorize the temporary use permit to BC Housing to construct and operate.
Jan, show me your address, please. Your address before you speak.
I live in Rossland, but I am with the lower, with entities that serve in the.
You can just give us your address.
What's your address?
At 2523 Irwin Avenue in Rossland.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking from a perspective of 3 different kind of perspectives. One is a founding member of the Supportive Housing Working Group for this region, president of the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society, as well as chair of the Attainable Housing Committee for the Lower Columbia Community Development Team Society. And I'm not asking for 3 times the number of time, just because there's 3 organizations. So certainly the housing need research and strategic planning that has been done by the Attainable Housing Committee, as was represented in some of the presentations or this comments from BC Housing, is there's certainly a need for housing right across the spectrum, and we need to be addressing those issues right across the spectrum. But the research does demonstrate very clear evidence that providing safe and affordable housing for vulnerable members of the community does provide the security for them to be able to tackle other issues in their lives. And that, that was talked about again by BC Housing. And I personally seen some of the results of that from individuals who've been able to get their lives together. Maybe not perfect, but they're moving ahead and they're actually being able to hold housing, hold jobs, and so on. Now in 2013, the LCCBS helped to establish the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society, which currently owns or is developing affordable rental housing units in Trail, Rossland, and Fruitvale. By the time we open the Fruitvale building, we'll be up to 87 units of housing and growing. But the key thing is that we don't have the 24/7 on-site staffing required to safely house individuals whose lives are very unstable. But we may be able to house some of those individuals once they're stabilized. And that can make, that advances people through that spectrum of housing. So to address the needs of this population, Trail critically needs both an emergency shelter and very critically needs the permanent supportive housing solution. And there's no question that we can ignore that we need to look for that long-time solution. And I suspect this location is not the best for that. The Supportive Housing Working Group was established in 2018 under the auspices of the Skills Center as part of the implementation of the region's poverty reduction plan. Recognizing our region has a growing population of individuals who are homeless or precariously housed, the working group has been advocating for the establishment of a permanent supportive housing in Trail. And we've been supporting as well collaboration amongst the various service organizations to make sure we provide the wraparound supports required by this population. Not done a bad job there. While it's important not to lose sight of the critical need for that long-term solution of supportive housing, creating a purpose-built modular emergency shelter is an important step in addressing the needs.
Can I call it order?
Yes.
Well,
Sorry, your time is up.
Okay,
Okay, thank
fair
you.
enough.
Is there anyone else that would like to address council?
Address the issue.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name's Donovan Brown, I'm property 1100 Tamarack Avenue. Last year, we addressed this issue. Business community made it clear that we didn't want it downtown anymore. I'm pretty sure it's on the record that I voiced that if they took another year to find a place, it better not be in the Gulch. And you've got no excuse, because I think the business community has been very open about how they feel about how this is impacting their businesses, their customers, their employees. My question would be, I mean, I like the concept of a homeless facility. I think it's great. If it was only that wonderful that it was unfortunate someone got divorced or a car accident or something, but the reality is we see it. And they're labeled crackheads, whatever. They're drug addicts, they're criminals, they're crooks, they
Sorry,
deter-
Donovan, are you going to speak to the temporary?
I
permit?
am going to say that the location can be a contentious issue. And I don't want it to be, well, we don't want it downtown, so let's put it in the Gulch. Well, we don't want it in the Gulch, let's leave it downtown. Well, why won't we put it in Mural Heights? Why don't we put it next to an elementary school? How about we put it in Roslyn? Well, now all of a sudden our perspective changes. Would we put it in, like you guys, I guess, BC Housing, you're from Vancouver or somewhere in a big city, nice condos, I don't know where you live, but would you have a whole floor taken to facilitate 18 beds in your
So, point
community?
of order, please, Donovan.
Yes.
We want you to speak about the temporary use permit tonight.
Okay.
Please.
My question is, and I'll end.
Okay.
Would you approve a temporary use permit in your own house or your next door neighbor? Yes or no? Thank you.
Thank you, Donovan.
Hi there, I'm Alex Coots. I'm at 1329 Grosvenor Place in Castlegar. I'm the president of the Colombo Lodge. I guess the first thing we want to say is that the safety of these homeless people, that Roslyn Avenue, we've been there a long time. As was pointed out, there's a lot of truck traffic. There's no official crosswalk with lights, so there's a real danger to these homeless people when they're not paying attention, and they may not be all in good conscience because they may be addicted or they may have me on drugs, whatever. We're really concerned about that. The next thing, what we heard tonight was that there really hasn't been a community approach to this. This is a community issue, and it should be a community that determines where the least impactful location is to put this shelter. And so the homework hasn't been done. We haven't exhausted all avenues. We're well aware of what's going on downtown. We feel it's just going to be transported to the Gulch, and that the piazza is going to become a campground. And we're really concerned because that is, we're a nonprofit society. We make our money with events, celebrations of life, and those bookings are going to drop off. And we've been here since 1905. And Trail's got a huge Italian community and a huge history. I'm not saying the shelter's not needed, but you got to look at the impact. And there's other businesses and residents also in the Gulch. And your community plan, official community plan, talks about the revitalization of the Gulch, which we were part of. It talks about entrances to the city and the pride that we have in Trail. And I'm sorry, this is not going to be a benefit. So I really think we need to strike a committee. I want to request this council and BC Housing to strike a committee that involves the community. And I'm talking people. The last couple of things, I just want to know, why is the CEO permitted to make a recommendation on his report before it goes to council in a public hearing? I'm just curious, because that doesn't seem to be the unbiased approach. And then lastly, you're going to do a risk analysis, as the gentleman ahead. Can we get a yes or no if there's going to be a risk analysis on the benefit of this shelter? Thank you.
John Panzio, 866 Forest Drive, building chairman for the Colombo Lodge, volunteer position. The proposed temporary emergency homeless shelter at 585 Roslyn Avenue is right across from one of the three main highways to the entrance of Trail. And it's right next to Colombo Lodge, the Bottle Depot, and neighbor residential houses where an elderly lady lives. For the last 5 years or so, as building chairman, I've been reporting to the membership in City Hall and the FCB disturbances and events that have been occurring around the lodge and the piazza. Now, I'm not going to go through all the events at the lodge because you have the data. I sent you all the letters because I want to fill up my 3 minutes. If the homeless shelter is moved up to the 585 Rockland Avenue, there is no doubt that now we have another area of the city that's going to be impacted more. Everybody from the, you're going to be seeing people going on the sidewalks with buggies all the way from Rossland Avenue all the way to Trail. I'm trying to catch up here because I skipped a page here. Other BC municipalities, like Penticton, have instituted shelter location guidelines where shelters are not to be located, with the goal that the facility minimize conflicts and concerns with other nearby land use and safety concerns with the vulnerable and neighbors. And these are some of the guidelines. Homeless shelters should not be near business that rely on foot traffic. In the last couple of weeks, we had 2 celebrations of life at the Colombo Lodge. One was attended by well over 300 people, and the other one, 150 people. The average wedding attendance is around 150. The average banquet attendance is 100 to 150. Our monthly supper meetings, we serve anywhere from 75 to 104 people. The recycling depot, which is located right next to the Colombo Lodge, their average foot traffic is 100 people per day. This is another guideline. Homeless shelters should not be near residence homes for elderly adults. The proposed shelters will be located right next to 565 Rossland Avenue, where an elderly lady has residence. And shelters must be a minimum 150 meters from parks. Piazza Colombo location is 50 meters right from the park, from the shelter. An homeless shelter, very, very important, must not front a highway. The proposed homeless shelter location is right next to one of the 3 main highways entrance to Trail. The only sidewalk that connects downtown to Rossland Avenue is the sidewalk along the Piazza Colombo, and they have to cross the highway to get to the other side, 555 Rossland Avenue.
Sorry, Mr. Latanzio, your time is up. Your 3 minutes.
Can I just put my final comment? I'll stick to my final comment.
Do you have my 3 minutes?
No.
Why not?
And finally, to mayor and council. As elected official of the business and taxpayers of Trail, a no vote to a temporary use permit 585 Rossland Avenue puts pressure where pressure belongs to come up with a permanent location. And a yes vote that we all face a negative consequences in the recently unsafe community, and that nothing has changed, and we keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. I think the city has no choice but to stand up for the betterment of the entire community, and that our solution is not a hardship, one faction of our community to support another. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing to BCI. I don't know if they're aware or not, but temporary shelter location, there is an easement on the property.
How much
petition you got? Thank you.
Petition, how many signed petition?
Yes. Sorry. We have over 400 signatures.
Okay. You want to read that with Councillor Hanson, please? Thank you very much. Sorry, additional.
My name is Joe Boyer. I'm at 304 Rose Street. Before that, 5 years I've lived there. Before that, I lived 5 years at 497 Rossland Avenue. I've been with Green Gulch for 10 years. there's been a stigma of living in the Gulch. People turn their nose at you. But we've tried very hard to grow our community, and it's full of young families and children. So I come to you as a father of 4 children, 2 children, but I very cautiously correct you. My children, their bus stop is at the front doors of the shelter. It's not across the street now. Secondly, my children catch bus at 7:30, 8 to 8, whatever that was. That's not going to protect my children. It's not adequate. I'm also the manager of Lorco Auto Parts Downtown Trail. It's not adjacent to the current shelter, but it's not really much different in distance than the proposed one. And we are constantly having issues with the homeless as well. I want a solution. I want a permanent solution. This is not it. I don't have an elegant speech. I am not prepared. But I think you all know this is not the right location. And they have not put in the work to even put in a presentation, facts, anything. We asked questions, they had nothing. They skirted around the questions like politicians. No offense. That's all I have to say. In your heart, I think you know this is the wrong decision. Thank you for your time.
My name's Ken LaRose. I live on 1505 Lily Street, Mary. LaRose Street, Mr. Boyle lives on this because my family's been here forever. We love this city. No question that we need this shelter, and there's also no question that this is not the place for it. What we got tonight, I was really hoping to come here, see this presentation, and be sold. I was heard that there was a big presentation. I was ready to be sold on the idea that as members of, somebody got married at the Colombo Lodge, has attended funerals at the Colombo Lodge, whose family helped build the piazza across the street, who lived in the Gulch forever, that I would see a concrete plan and be satisfied with it. What I got instead, and I can tell you as an MBA with a degree in marketing, was the carrot and stick approach, which is, let's make this look like a really rosy idea, big fences, lots of space, and then being told that the facility itself is not big enough, that the territory is not big enough to host what actually needs to be done. It's being referred to as temporary without a location, budget, plan, or anything else for a permanent solution. So the risk of this becoming, as was mentioned before, the permanent solution is very high. And it's important to be a good neighbor, as they keep saying. What happens if somebody's not a good neighbor? This is already there to catch the people that fall through the cracks. There's nowhere else to send them. And so my questions, I guess, are, is there a plan? Because I know there isn't, so I'll ask anyway rhetorically, of where a permanent shelter would be, how big it would be, what it would cost, if it's affordable, if it's in a budget that anybody can see that's notable, and also rhetorically, because of where it's being placed, would you want to host your wedding, funeral, grad party, or take your children to the park to sit and read, or catch a bus, as Mr. Boyle pointed out, because there aren't many places in the Gulch with very small lots on a highway to get it done. And also finally rhetorically, what would you think of a city that decided to put this shelter on its face as you come into it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diana Daghofer, and I'm the co-chair of the Trail Community Action Team. First of all, I want to say that I agree with, I think everyone that we.
Need your address.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1975 Kirkup Avenue in Oslo. I agree with almost everybody I've heard tonight that this is not a permanent solution. We absolutely need a permanent supportive housing building with the kinds of supports that are going to help people stabilize their lives. I just have 2 other quick points to make. I know that there was concern expressed about secondhand smoke, and I've sent a letter to council with some research that shows that there is very little to no risk to the general public from secondhand smoke from fentanyl, which is the primary drug that's being used. And I also want to mention that, you know, wherever a shelter is put in the city, it's gonna be part of our city and it's gonna be part of our community that we need to deal with. And we all, I think, need to figure out how to coexist better. One of the things that we can do is to learn how to address people who are struggling. We have a workshop that's taking place on February 25th, just before the coldest night of the year walk, which is a fundraiser. And this is a workshop being given by Ryan Dowd, who's a world-renowned speaker.
Point of order, please.
Okay.
Yeah. We talk about.
We would just like to invite everyone to the community, to the workshop to learn how to deal with our neighbors no matter what their situation is. Thank you.
Good.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Jones. My name is Gerald Clausen, address 1390 Rawson Trail Wagon Road. I've been a business owner and trail for over 40 years in the Gulch. I own commercial and residential units in the Gulch. And I've seen the disaster that, you know, our homeless friends have caused over the years. And it's with the excellent questions that council asked and that my friends behind me asked, it is impossible for council to vote yes on this proposal with the information that was given to us today by BC Housing. It cannot go. It should be it's done. Secondly, if BC Housing really cared about our homeless friends, they would not be setting them up to be looked at like animals in a zoo. Thank you.
Well, I got 12 pages to read and I got 10 minutes. To do it. So I'm gonna be going pretty quick and all over.
Okay.
My name is Terry Hannock. I'm 74 years old. I lived all my life here in Trail, lived on Roslyn Avenue. I'm president of Trail Wildlife, on the Colombo Lodge executive. I'm school trustee in District number 20, and I'm a long-standing citizen of this community. I'm going to be speaking to you, giving my opinion to you as a school trustee. I've been school trustee for 9 years. The people elected me to make sure that their children get the best education possible and to make their children safe at school and safe going to school. I oppose putting this shelter on there. I've been down there seeing the kids get picked up to go to Workfield. There was 18 of them coming back from school. There was 25. The place where they pick up, parents wait in the parking lot. Their kids will play in the lot waiting for their brother and sisters to get home, to come and go home. I'm just going to jump all over the presentation that community, CDC, whatever presented was brutal. They never made it up to the.
Point of order, please. Can we talk about the temporary use permit?
Well, I'm getting around to that, okay?
Okay.
But I mean, the shelter is in the wrong place. But what I'm gonna say, the shelter, well, I'm not even gonna say that because it should never go through. You say you have 18 persons up to 30 and now it's up to 45. I'm gonna just jump over here, like you said, only got 3 minutes, so I've done 1 minute now. Well, I'm not, pardon?
I said, sorry, you're pretty close to 3 minutes.
Well, no, I'm not. Anyway, I suggest that you have a group come in and do what they say, go over everything, whether it's a police, fire hall, I mean, anybody but what we had here with no consultation whatsoever. Now, I
I've talked to Colin about property, and I'm gonna let everybody know that I did find property and it could be used for housing. And it's out towards Casino at McGauley's. It belongs to, the regional district. The land is flat, it doesn't have water or sewer. It only takes a half an hour, or a half a mile to hook up the water. Colleen, this is important, that people know that there is a place out there, and I've checked it. And it's only a mile to walk from Bank of Montreal to that place. In Nelson, they walk 2.5 miles. So this area's gotta be looked after. And I talked to Colin, he never got back to me, so I did it on my own. And this should be looked after to do it. Now, like I said, I can go on and on and on. One is I didn't like the idea of Colin coming on the radio and talking about that council was there. In closing,
Sorry, point of order, please, your time is up.
in closing, I recommend Trail Council turn down this proposal and let's get a group together and talk. And it's not too late. Rome wasn't built in a day. Thank you.
John, did you want to speak?
I do. I apologize, but I'm not gonna stand up. Let him
Okay,
stand
I
up.
need your name and address.
John
please.
Urquhart,
Yeah.
9851, 28 Delway Road, Trail, BC, which is a Monterey. I own the gun store downtown, sporting goods store. What I'm gonna say is probably different than what we've been hearing. It was said on the thing that the homeless shelters have gotten permanent residence for X many people, which is great. These people have lost their ability to rent, so sure, a homeless shelter in the Gulch would be fine. But our problem is not homelessness, it is mental health.
Point of order, please, John.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that Sandy spoke to you about that as well.
Yes, but-
Okay, we want to talk about the temporary use permit tonight.
So I'm saying, yes, a temporary use calling in the Gulch would be fine. If it was for people that are homeless without a mental health. I've only got 2 little more paragraphs. Our problem is homelessness. That does not belong in the Gulch. We also need more support from the RCMP, Mike, who are always short-staffed. If you're drinking beer and you're impaired, you're arrested. If you're impaired on drugs, the RCMP responses, nothing we can do. I understand a person was sleeping under a tarp in the alley in the shelter, behind the shelter. A truck went through, the guy woke up, the driver didn't know he was there, his foot got run over under the truck, and the RCMP issued a $400 ticket to the driver. The goddamn guy that was under the tarp should have gotten a ticket for sleeping in the road. And I know it's not Mike's problem, I've talked to him before, I'm sure he's tired of hearing from me, but things have to change. We need to get a shelter. The shelter that Terry's speaking of, Casino, would be great for those that are homeless and not addicted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to address council at this time? Okay, come on up, please. We just need your name and address, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Patrick Watson. I live at 440 Roslyn Avenue. I'll keep this brief because I know that we're short on time here. It was mentioned that the staff of the current temporary shelter are the ones who quote unquote move people along from downtown businesses when there are issues. Who will be doing that downtown now if the temporary shelter goes to Roslyn Avenue? This isn't going to prevent street people from being downtown. Who's responsible for that now that the staff is 1.5 kilometers away? An affected group that I don't think I've heard addressed yet is all the marginalized people who have navigated the treacherous roads of addiction and who are no longer finding themselves in the throes of active addiction. BC Housing has already been clear in their presentation. There will be needles and drug use and drug paraphernalia in the immediate surrounding area in Roslyn Avenue. These people who have worked their way out of that situation are going to have an addiction trigger each and every time they drive by. Is there anything being done to address this? That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
How are we doing? Is anybody else wanting to speak? Okay. Please.
Hi, my name is Jason Mueller. I live at 181 Roslyn Avenue. I've lived in the Gulch for 11 years and I've worked at the downtown core for 15 at Ralcom there. So I've seen the Gulch, I've seen the downtown core over the last, 15 years. And I remember walking anywhere in the core, feeling completely comfortable. And I don't want to walk my dog out at night with where it's at. I've had to walk the alley behind the homeless shelter and feel concerned going through it, seeing illicit use out behind there. And I can't help but think of if they're not allowing drug use in the shelter and it's just being outside the door and my kids are at the bus stop, is that what's happening there as well? And then the other question I would have is, while it was at the shelter downtown at Laninia, was it being considered a permanent solution then, or was it temporary? And if it was considered temporary, when did they start looking for a new solution? Was that when they had the final year of their permit, or before that? That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I read my stuff that I sent in today?
Sorry?
I sent in an email today, can I read that?
If it, is
Well,
it
everything,
pertaining
I
to
mean,
a
it all has
temporary
to
use
do,
permit?
we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the temporary use permit, right?
No, I don't.
So my name is Marty Macway and I live on 4th Avenue. So I just wanna know why the proposed site was up for a vote when the residents of Trail have not been consulted, so I agree with everybody else that we need public consultation. And have you considered that the issue is not one of homelessness? Have you considered that the issue is mental illness and drug addiction, which leads to homelessness? Homelessness thereby being the result or symptom, right? It's just a symptom. Do you believe you're helping the shelter residents, street people beyond a temporary Band-Aid solution that not only causes harm to them, but to the residents and the businesses of Trail? Why are the shelter residents not required to submit to detox and mental health counseling in an effort to rehabilitate?
Marty, point of order, please. You're not talking about the temporary use permit right now. Okay,
It all has
thank
to
you.
do with the shelter. I don't know. To me, it's if you build it, they will come.
Okay, thank you.
That's my opinion. If
Thank
you build it, they will come. You're not helping.
Is there anyone else that wants to come forward tonight? Will you have an opportunity? Okay. Looks like, yes. It looks like, we're done the public question period. Thank you everyone for coming. Okay, if we could, start the rest of the council meeting, please. So we're on to item number 4, communications. BC Housing. I'll actually let, Mr. McClure take his part of this, section 37. Oh, sorry.
Next room needs to be.
You shut the door.
We gotta.
I'm gonna hand this next section over to, Mr. Leclerc, our CA.
Okay, so we're moving on to, communications, the, staff memo report based on the, desire for BC Housing to have a temporary use permit applied for, by Roslyn Avenue. Couple of things, some history I think is important. Number one, reason that we are here is because back in September, there was a memo in front of council, actually it was August 15th, memo in front of council about a 3-year extension of the current Amenia shelter. There was a desire at that point in time to have that revisited, and from there, council was clear or was very concerned about continuing that. Concerned that they wanted not a temporary solution, they wanted a permanent solution. BC Housing has worked with this with a number that are still on council for over 5 years, or to try and find permanent location for the shelter. They have had different properties and they investigate them, and other reasons those have not come to fruition. One of the major challenges that trail faces and other communities do not is the fact that our OCPs, or our official community plan, which is a guiding document for the community, is 20 years old. When you have a document that is that old, usually having zoning for shelters or other types of entities don't exist. That's certainly the case for the OCP has not been updated, and that is something that we are looking at. We're looking at trying to kickstart that in 2023. It will probably take over a year to get that. In the meantime, that is why any building in trail that may be a shelter has to go through this process. They need a temporary use permit from city council because there's no zoning allowing for a shelter in the entire city. So when that happens, in maybe being differently if you had an OCP, which has that ongoing stakeholder engagement, mapping out what uses would be used in, or what uses would be allowed in zoning in different areas, where it's downtown versus other parts of the community. That is usually the venue that one has for reaching out and saying, this would be a property, or this is an area where a shelter may be placed. And if that was the case, it certainly allows a bit more ability from an entity like BC Housing to say, when we're looking at properties, if we're going to purchase a property, then it would be good to know that if we purchase that property, that it has an allowable use of having a shelter. That certainly can be one of the challenges, and it's certainly one of the challenges even as we face now, is as we heard some say that BC Housing hasn't done this, they haven't committed to that. The cost of taking on this particular program is quite high. And it certainly wouldn't make any sense for BC Housing to move forward on that, only to find out the council said, you're not putting it in. So when people ask, how can we haven't mapped this out? How come we don't have this exactly detailed as to where we'll be and what it's gonna do? There's certainly a matter of time and effort by BC Housing on being able to place and find final details. Why would you put the time in if council's not even gonna approve it? So we're at a place right now where they're trying to move forward. They are here and they are working on this because that's what they were directed to by the previous council. So people get upset with them, people could be angry about what they're doing, or they rush too fast. But they were told, and as persons that pervade having shelters in communities, they were told, we are not giving you a 3-year extension, we're giving you a 1-year extension. And in that 1-year extension, it's not like there's any properties around here that are zoned for having a shelter. So you have 1 year. If you have a place of property that has certain parameters that might fit a modular type construction, that is what we talked about. That is why the city came forward and said, we have a piece of property that is flat. It has plenty of space, we believe, kind of going up on the embankment for an outdoor. It has water and sewer connections right at the location. The idea of temporary, certainly respect that people say temporary, 6 years is not temporary. Well, 6 years is temporary. 3 years would be. Or 6 years is still temporary when you're talking about having a permanent solution. The permanent solution is gonna be 20, 30, 50 years, right? Yes, we all hope that maybe we could solve the solution, homelessness, high housing prices, rentals, people investing and doing different things with their properties. That's kind of what's happening here. So I have to understand, previous council has asked BC Housing to work on this and get it done within a year. With the notion that within a year, if there is no shelter, if there is no new shelter, temporary shelter, permanent shelter, there will be no shelter. Now, I know many of you feel, or some of you here tonight say, that's great. Now just put them out there, they're gonna pick themselves up by their bootstraps and they're just gonna walk on and they're gonna be great. That's what we've heard from certain people.
Don't say that. That's not true.
Can I call point order? Please stick to the recommendation.
No.
Please, to the
No,
agenda.
Jeff, we're on, and
Can we get to the
Colin's recording.
recommendation?
I will be, so part of its history, Council Wilson. So, because there's a lot of questions as to why. We understand that people would like the homeless, vulnerable population to be able to find solutions. We hear empathy for people, but they also say, I don't want it near my property. They also say, as far as I'm concerned, there's a solution, but you haven't thought about it. We should come together. We're gonna find another location together. There's already been properties looked at. People have been doing that. It's not for lack of effort. So, as we were here today, we're trying to look at why we would do this, because the fear is that if we don't have a temporary solution, while we continue to look for a permanent solution, then we will have no shelter.
Where's the risk benefit?
Again, I'm not sure, when you talk about risk benefit, the risk, I guess I would say, is that for the individuals that we have in the current shelter, especially because where we have it right now, there is no outdoor space. There is, as we talked about before, more of just kind of dividers where people have cots, don't have necessarily a room, which makes it not easy for someone that is trying to get back on their feet to be able to do that, to be able to have safety, to have comfort, to know who they're staying with, allows for, again, a healthy return. So we have people that are there outside of the shelter. We have many people that use the services, whether or not it's having a shower, having something to eat. But they are either banned in some aspects from staying overnight, or they don't want to stay overnight. And that particular group tends to cause a lot of the challenges. So at the same time, when you're saying, we don't want to see that, we don't like that, we understand that. That is why BC Housing has offered, and again, looking at conditions on any temporary permit to be able to try to alleviate the concerns that we've heard, which are legitimate, about needles being left over, garbage being left over. Is there a place for parks to be parked? Is there solutions to have them kind of in a place that they feel safe and they're protected, or that they are able to feel comfortable to sit down and do their activities and be with their friends, connect with the shelter, to try to build that camaraderie. Is it possible that we've got people moving up and down the street? We already have it now. I can't imagine with 18 people in the shelter itself that are, I think, good people that are looking for a warm place to bed. I have one. I think many here have a warm bed, have food in the kitchen. So it's very hard to be in those people's shoes.
I'm sorry, but the elephant in the room is mental health. Why don't we handle this like
Yeah.
the province of
Mr.
Alberta?
Dale, please let,
The province of Alberta is
Mr.
dealing with
McClure,
mental
conduct
health.
his report, please.
What we're talking about here is a solution.
Why are you trying to convince us?
You're-
to harm?
yeah.
Yeah.
We're still our piece.
We're gonna let you.
I think we should just have a vote.
It's a different-
I think we've heard all that. So,
Let's just get on.
what is on here is the idea that although you may feel that.
No, it's not.
No.
It's not just.
Let me finish, please, be respectful.
I'm
We
trying.
just
Okay,
want to
let me
let him
respect-
finish his report.
So if you were saying that because of the behavior of others that aren't actually sheltered guests, that we shouldn't have it there, I understand that and I understand your concerns. But legitimate people that are in those spaces and need those spaces to get healthy, they will no longer have a space. And that's something that we need to consider, because if we don't have a space for them, they themselves may go down this slope of becoming addiction, coming other issues, as far as it's not having a safe place to live. So
It has to be a community solution.
again, as far as a community solution, I would guarantee you that it would be very difficult as a community to come together and be able to say, we're gonna have something here available by September 30th.
You'll give us a chance.
And you're killing these people with a slow demise.
If we could
That's
please-
recognition like that.
Could we just let Mr. McClure finish and then we can get to the recommendation?
And so we understand, again, we hear your point, okay? But the point here is that BC Housing is here because we asked them to be here, come to the plate to find a solution for us. They have found, okay, you may disagree with their process, that is fine, that's not what we're talking about. They're in front of council tonight, it's an opportunity to have a temporary solution for these individuals. BC Housing has been very clear that they are willing to look at and work on conditions that are placed by council to try to alleviate what could be and, parameters around cleaning up, taking care of the piazza, watching out for drugs and talking
No, but does council have to vote yes on this? Is that what you're trying to
They
say?
do not.
Can sign the order, please?
So it is up to council to be able to make their vote. I'm just saying to you, this is where we're at.
We're trying
No,
to.
you're
I'm quite confident I will not convince many of you, okay, I get that. I'm just telling you the reason why, because there seems to be a lot of questions, there's a lot of questions as to basic housing. Why are we here, why are we doing this, what's going on? They found a solution. We understand that people here, don't know the solution. I understand that you do
Mr.
not.
Collins, what BC Housing, what BC Housing has described there. Please, 2 minutes, 1 minute. Can I just ask one question? Please, what BC Housing has described is a camp. 5 module homes. Those 5 module homes, they built camps, with self-contained in a month. So you got lots of time to find a spot and put the fire.
We don't actually, because in many cases, we don't have connections, we don't have a property. If whatever properties they have, the property that we've been looking at, they have done their due diligence on and they're ready to move forward on. If we need to revisit this, then we start over again. If you do due diligence, have to take time. Will we find a spot? Maybe.
Start all over.
That's fine. Anyway.
Well, that's just one thing, if I could please, and that's about what I think BC Housing and others are forgetting, it's impact. Impact, and they talk about more space up there, but the space is in conflict with school children, with the Congo Lodge and all the activities.
Yes.
It's not a safe place.
And that is why BC Housing said conditions in place to have controls, security, safety. That is something that they are committed to.
Their questions to the councilors undermine their selling points.
Please, Dale.
So, obviously, council, I don't really know what to tell you. Council. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. So before we get started here, I do wanna thank BC Housing, for their presentation tonight and the work that they've done on this temporary use application. I wanna thank Mr. McClure for the work that he's done on this application. And I also want to thank all of you for being here tonight and expressing your concerns. my position going forward, and I wanna put this out to council, I hope we can have a bit of a discussion here about it, is that we, pass a motion to direct staff to, support council in, bringing forward or having a committee to look at all the questions and concerns that you've brought forward tonight. I'm asking that we can defer the decision on this recommendation for until the next council meeting. And I guess I'm making that a motion, and I don't know if council is wanting to talk about it before we put it, you know.
No,
in
they
a
get seconded.
motion, or
It's, well, they get seconded.
okay, no problem. We will move the recommendation then, thank you. The recommendation is that council, taking into account public input received, consider authorizing the issuance of a temporary use permit to allow the construction of a modular emergency housing homeless shelter, on the city-owned property at 585 Roslyn Avenue for a 3-year term. So the recommendation is before you. Can I have someone to make that motion, please? Councillor Benson, is there a seconder? Councillor
Pauline,
Butler?
did you say from the input from the public, you wanna go ahead with it?
Yeah.
We're voting on it.
Voting
on
it. Yeah, but it's the council's idea that they want it to be passed.
Take it into account, the public. Anyway.
Well, all I heard tonight was negative input from the public.
Okay, so the recommendation is there. Councillor Benson has moved it. Councillor Butler has seconded it. All those in favor? Sorry?
We have discussion?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you guys. It's a long night. Is there any questions or concerns about the recommendation?
Just a couple comments. I'll start if that's okay. I just want to thank Tyler and Douglas and Nanette for the presentation tonight, and thank you, Jane, for joining us from a mental health perspective, and Mr. McClure for your report. I also want to thank the public for their correspondence and for coming here tonight. I read every single email, I listened to every single word you said. I came here with an open mind that I would learn something new to help me inform this decision, and I did. And I do want to thank Nanette for her explanation on how a shelter with outdoor amenities and privacy for the residents can help them on their homeless continuum. My vote here tonight is specifically on the temporary use permit on this location. It doesn't reflect my view of the unhoused population. Trust me, I've been doing the work. I've been learning where our homeless are on the continuum, what struggles they're having, both shelter users and non-shelter users. I support the idea of a temporary shelter to be a bridge while we secure a permanent one. I just don't believe that this location is going to provide that bridge. BC Housing, we want to be a success story in Trail. I think we all do. You have a new council here, and we're a very collaborative council with a really diverse set of skills. And we're asking you to take us up on this and be a support to you. Tyler, you mentioned that you're open to ideas, and I hope that you mean it, and I hope that you'll meet with us further. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I just want to echo Councillor Benson's comments that regardless, like, this is our first test, and it's not like in school where you take a test and you do pass it or fail it. It's a test that is designed to fail. And I know I can speak for council that we care deeply about our unhoused, about our most vulnerable. I support supportive housing. I support the need for a shelter. And I'm looking forward to working with our new council in making those things happen. And I really want to thank everybody for coming. As keep saying constable, I wonder why. Councillor Benson has said, I've read all the emails and I've spoken to people and I've listened. And I really appreciate the input that we got here tonight. Thank you.
So this is the first of many tough decisions we're gonna have to make as councillors. Regardless of how we all vote, this situation we face is set up to fail someone. I don't know about the rest of my fellow councillors, but I suspect that we're all feeling about the same. We've had 2 weeks of sleepless nights trying to figure out the best plan of action and to do the right thing. I have had emotional conversations with stakeholders, community members, frontline workers, shelter guests. We as a group have received over 50 emails and numerous phone calls. I have been frustrated and I have been disappointed. We as a city are dealing with issues that are the direct result of the provincial government failing. It is not our responsibility an addictions crisis, however, it seems we are being forced to do so. For context, as Colin says, this site was identified in the previous term as an 11th hour potential solution when the shelter temporary use permit was up for renewal last September. This was after BC Housing has tried to purchase multiple properties over the last few years, but unfortunately not being able to come to agreement with other property owners. This way that this potential partnership was structured by the city, contributing city-owned land to BC Housing, was to expedite moving the shelter out of the downtown core within a year of that extension. I feel that this location is not the right location. I am concerned for the safety of the individuals that use the shelter. Crossing the street downtown can be a challenge for some as it is, let alone a 3-lane highway with terrible visibility. And unfortunately, a Chambers truck does not stop on a dime. Not to mention having these ATCO trailers at the entrance to our community is not good for tourism or economic development, nor is having the beautiful piazza at the Colombo littered with drug paraphernalia and debris. And if we want to work on beautifying our entrance to our community, this is certainly not doing that. I have heard from many people that they feel this is a Band-Aid solution. And while it is not meant to be a Band-Aid solution, you know, it's just the short-term plan is what this was looked at. Right now, but moving the shelter 1.1 kilometers from its current location is not solving the problem. Don't get me wrong. I am downtown every single day and I can understand our businesses and our citizens' frustrations. However, if anyone thinks for 1 second that moving the shelter 1 kilometer away will keep the vulnerable out of the downtown core, I feel you will be very disappointed by simply removing moving the shelter. Yeah. Will be accessing the Salvation Army and their new commercial kitchen that they are building. The banks are downtown, their opioid therapy replacement is downtown, that's where they will be. But we all must remember that in saying all of this, that not every homeless individual in our community is a drug addict, and not every drug addict has mental health issues. We need to have empathy because the next person you cross could simply be a neighbor that was overprescribed medication for an injury that got addicted to drugs. We have two separate issues. We have people that have fallen on hard times and need the shelter to help them get back on their feet. And we have individuals that use the shelters that have mental health and addictions problems. Our shelter operators are not trained mental health and addictions counselors, and it is not their responsibility. I mean no disrespect, but I'm sorry, Interior Health, we need more. There needs to be full-time mental health and addictions people on site 24/7 to help these individuals. Housing, we understand that you have been consistently investigating other properties, and some of those properties, as Councillor Martin mentioned, are potentially within a floodplain. Well, that's basically Downtown Trail and East Trail. And if our river, which is one of the most controlled water systems in North America, was to flood, then the Hanford nuclear facility is 6 feet underwater, and we have bigger issues than 5 floating ATCO trails. Nonetheless, Trail Creek flooded in 1969, Gorge Creek flooded in 1997, and it is acceptable to put a modular structure in another area that could potentially see flooding. No one can be prepared for an act of God. And as I said last September, we are very limited to what is available in our community for land and buildings, so we should start looking at some temporary concessions, as this is a temporary solution. Furthermore, after reviewing your emergency shelter program framework, it states that providers are to create a safe and secure environment and must have safety protocols in place and provide clear guidance for client and staff safety. Also to adopt practices and standards that minimize the risk of male violence and ensure that specialized safety and security needs of women clients are met. If that is the case, How did a knife get pulled on an individual in the shelter? How did a female guest get attacked? And why is there continued drug use in the shelter? BC Housing, how are you making sure there is accountability, not just to our guests, but to our community as a whole? When is the last time that an independent review and assessment to confirm the services delivered are meeting program objections, and when was it done? And also performance measures, how many of the clients are being housed within 60 days? Let's talk about who to call matrix. Our business owners and our community leaders are trying to work within that matrix that CDS and BC Housing came up with. But again, a lack of accountability when calling CDS when you have concerns about an individual's behavior, health, safety, or welfare on this property, and to be told, sorry, we can't help you, he's not one of our clients. Nowhere on the list does it say call CDS and we will only help you with our clients. Where does one get this client list with whom they will and will not help? And when you call regarding the state of property garbage needles and then told, sorry, you can't go near someone's tent on their property, that it's up to the city and that they don't want anything to do with that individual. Where on the matrix does it say that CDS gets to pick and choose where and who they want to respond to? I want to be clear, I agree we need a shelter, but we need one with proper support from Interior Health, proper management from the shelter provider, and more accountability from BC Housing with the shelter provider. So at this time, I will not support the temporary use permit on Roslyn Avenue.
Those are big shoes to follow there, yeah.
They're size 7.
I wanna thank everyone for being down here and everyone who's here through Zoom, other residences and all the professionals that are here with BC Housing and Interior Health. I myself, I was never gonna vote yes for trailers to go to the entrance of our city. For 2 reasons. I'm worried about the safety of the shelter users and also the safety of the public. So I was out on day 1. I don't think this location is the best that we can do. And I want to extend a helping hand to BC Housing to use us. I think I can speak on behalf of the council. I was so excited to work with you guys, but I'm not excited to work for you guys.
Yeah.
It felt like we were underused to have a brand new council. I would have, got on my bike and checked out locations for you, but we never got that offer from you guys. So I look forward to taking steps in the right direction where we can find a win-win, because that's what we should be going for at the end of the day, is an end goal in sight. Through compromise, we can find a win-win for everyone involved. Thank you.
I'm gonna be a lot quicker. I just wanna thank everyone who came up and spoke at that podium tonight. There's some very emotional comments that will stay with me for a long time. I know exactly how I'm voting tonight. I'm not supportive.
This has not been a 2-week exercise. This has been going on for 5 years now. I think it's important, very important actually, that we all recognize that as of the 29th of September, if we vote no, Trail will not have any sort of shelter space, 0. The RCMP, we've been informed that we have approximately 45 cases of homelessness in the city of Trail. 37 to 39 of them have relations to the city of Trail. I ask you, if you were so far out yourself on something, would you on the 28th of September wake up and say, they're closing this thing down tomorrow, I'm moving to Halifax? I don't think so. People will stay, I feel that people will stay close to where they have a family network. I would also like to challenge this room through your historical knowledge, which has been demonstrated tonight. You know who owns the buildings in Trail. I want to assure you that BC Housing has been in conversations with everybody. And no one has been able to come to the table with a realistic price offer on their homes. BC Housing is a crown corporation. Let's be clear. There is no such thing as government money. There's taxpayers' money. It's our money.
And BC Housing cannot pay $2 million on an assessed property of 243. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay, so I think it's important that we put some conditions on to this tonight. And I recognize, I will agree completely. It is the worst location we can come up with, but it's one of the only locations we can come up. There are 2 owned properties. I also want to make it clear that the city of Trail, I feel, has never been hiding the location. We've always said that we were looking at 2 city-owned lots. You're more than welcome, everyone in this room, everyone at home, to go to land title's office and find out what the city of Trail owns. It's not a secret. It's actually yours.
Elks property?
This one and the Williamsburg.
The Elks property? Who owns that?
It's not ours.
The Elks is right by the old bridge, that property.
Yeah, so that one, just so you know, has been explored as well. There's a setback of 30 meters from the river. It sits within the floodplain zone. Yes, I will agree. I don't think the ministry that deals with the Columbia Basin Trust, with the Columbia River, and the BC Housing have ever talked to one another. We're dealing with very old government.
All I'm just saying is because those guys, they took over that area before,
Yeah,
right?
so I just want to be clear, I feel that I want to be clear to everyone in the audience, that I can sit here tonight and tell you that I feel we have gone through almost every single possibility. And this is where we've come to at this point. And I challenge those out there who know individuals out there who own the properties that you see in your mind as being suitable sites to come back to the table.
Did you check the property that I said up towards?
Unfortunately, the property is outside of sale.
Who cares?
We're not, this is not what BC Housing is not looking in the regional district.
Paul, are you finished or?
I am. So I would like to put forward that if this motion goes forward, the conditions be attached, 24/7 security, not the current 8 to 8. Additional security on high event days at Colombo Lodge, including weddings, funerals, dinners, etc. Daily cleanup by CDS within a 400-meter radius on both public and private property with a direct hotline to CDS for this cleanup. Fencing, especially along the neighboring property line, be taken into high consideration and consultation as the individual decides obviously our most affected citizen. I would also suggest that variances from the city be explored if the fence has to be higher than anything that's currently in our zoning bylaws. A continued search, and by this I mean if we find a property tomorrow morning, if someone can step forward tomorrow morning, we still have this as our backup plan, but we move forward with a new permanent location. I would also like to see updates to both council and the residents of the city of Trail every 2 months for BC Housing. I'd like to see BC Housing work with the Ministry of Highways to install a crossing light proper that is of the standard of highways. And I'd also like to see BC Housing and the city to work with BC Transit and School District 20 to relocate the bus stops.
To what?
Relocate the bus stops.
Where?
Really?
Point of order, please. Councilor Butler.
To relocate the bus stops. And I'd also like to express my concern for all those that may be hit or get run over. The city of Trail is, and myself especially, are very concerned about this, and that it is something that we have communicated to BC Housing. And I'd also like to see that the emergency shelter program performance measures that has been set up with BC Housing be adhered to and work with the 60-day to 100-day rehousing of the individuals that are using our facilities. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Councilor Butler, is that an amendment to the recommendation?
Conditions.
Condition, okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councilor Cashel, have you had any?
I didn't realize I was supposed to make a speech at the end of all this. I'm learning as I go. I think I took up enough time at the beginning of this session. I came here with an open mind, and I thank my councillors for allowing a robust debate to occur. And I'm prepared to vote, and I'm ready to go.
Thank you, okay. So, the recommendation is before you. All those in favor of the recommendation as presented? All those opposed?
Okay, we can go.
Councillor Butler, did you want your vote noted? Councillor Butler was opposed. Thank you. Sorry?
Yeah, we were.
I was opposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you guys excuse me.
It's all good.
Six ones.
It's all good, yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the agenda. Item number 4.2. We have three proclamations before you. The first
Do we stay or go?
I'm just waiting on me.
While you're reading, do we know what percent of people at the homeless shelter have mental health problems? Our shelter, I'd say, would be very. Way to go, guys.
I don't know. Are you staying for the rest of the Oh, sorry, yeah, they're trying to move on with other business now. So we just need to be a bit quiet.
The rest of the stuff's just routine stuff, John.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, John.
We have a meeting on Thursday at 11.
Yes. United Church.
Yes.
Thanks for what you do there. And Mary Lynn. Well, we've talked about that, haven't we?
Sorry, guys, you know what, I'm sorry, but this is you guys, offering, if just need to get back on stage, yeah, thanks for coming.
You guys stand? Stand? You guys stand?
Are you guys staying up?
We do a run for council.
Good luck.
Now, Sandy, did you say that this is possible still here?
They are, so maybe just tell them that we're items over.
So I just wanted to thank BC Housing for coming tonight and their presentation. I don't know if you understood the results of the vote. It was the vote was 6-1 against the recommendation that was before us. So we're still looking forward to working with BC Housing and finding an appropriate place for the shelter. But I just wanted to say thank you, and we do continue to look for, we continue to look working with you to move this issue forward. And thank you for your time tonight, and thank staff and Councillor Mr. McClure for his work on this tonight as well. So moving on the agenda, we have we're at item 4.2, we have 3 proclamations before you. And the first proclamation, the recommendation is that council proclaim March 6, 2023 as World Lymphedema Day in the city of Trail. Can I have someone make that recommendation? Councillor Benson, Councillor Wilson, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. The next recommendation is that council proclaim the week of February 2026, 2023 as Heritage Week in the city of Trail. Can I have someone, Councillor Benson, Councillor Hanson, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. And the recommendation that council proclaim May 28th, 2023 as World Menstrual Health Day in the city of Trail. Can I have someone, Councillor Hanson and Councillor Benson, all those in favor? Opposed? So, that carried, but I don't believe it was unanimous. I didn't see Councillor Cashel vote. If he did not. If you don't, did he? Okay, on to council committee reports. Councillor Benson first. Thank you. Yeah. No, you didn't.
Hello?
On January 28th, I attended a Columbia River Treaty information session that details the Columbia River Treaty local government's efforts to integrate social and economic objectives into river management scenario modeling. Attendees include residents from all over the Columbia Basin, and the recording is now uploaded to the province of BC's YouTube channel if anyone's interested in checking it out. On February 4th, I attended the Trail Ambassador candidate debut at the Columbia Hall. Along with other members of council, we were treated to an entertaining evening hosted by our current Miss Trail, learning about the 6 candidates in the program this year. And I just want to say congratulations to Lauren Shepherd and Cassidy Favreau for an excellent event. The rest of my time since previous meeting has been spent meeting with residents, doing research and talking about the proposed shelter. So thanks for everybody tonight. That's my report, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benson. Any questions? Okay, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Along with Councillor Benson, I attended the webinar on the waterways as well, which is very informative. Other than that, I do want to thank everybody who has emailed and called me personally and spoken to me about the vote this evening. I look forward to continuing on with the work of the council on it. So that's the end of our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Benson? Councillor Cashel.
I have nothing to report this evening, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Hanson.
Along with the rest of council, we attended the Trail Ambassador debut, which was lovely to see, as well as attended Trail Community Action Team's meeting earlier this week.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Hanson? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. I also attended the ambassador debut with many councillors, and that was an experience. I've never attended that before, and I really enjoyed it. The one thing I want to mention to everyone from the regional district is that you're probably fully aware that there's going to be 2 major upgrades coming into the city trail. One's going to be at the McKelvey Creek landfill, and the other one's going to be at the Columbia Pollution Control Plant. Just today, I received information that I can share with everybody, and as I was waiting to pass along to everybody because we were going to be quite busy with tonight's meeting and had our minds elsewhere. I'll be sharing information on both in the event that any of council members get any questions regarding either of the upgrades. That's it for my report.
That's a busy committee. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I just wanted to thank Sandy and Andrea and our CAO with the organization of tonight. It was, well, there's a lot going on, and I think it went smooth, and just thank you to the fellow councillors, because we really put a lot of thought into this. It's comforting to me knowing how much everyone cares. And this is gonna be a topic now that we're gonna be dealing with for the rest of our term, so we gotta get to work, because we told BC Housing we wanna work, so let's look at starting a committee and let's get proactive and really get working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug? Okay, I will give my report. It's well, pretty much the same as all the councillors. I attended the ambassador program with most of the councillors, and just recently had a Trail Health and Environment Committee, Planning Committee, trying to schedule and look to booking our next meetings into the future. I, this morning, had a Zoom meeting with the Association of Kootenai Boundary Local Government, talking about the convention that's coming up, and we're doing a lot of work planning, workshops and tours down in Cranbrook where it's being held, and we're getting close to releasing all that information. So I look forward to letting council know what's coming up for that convention. And in between that, I have spent a lot of my time reading emails, getting phone calls. Much like the rest of council has, it's been quite overwhelming, and I just want to thank council again for the work that they've been doing. And looking forward to moving ahead with this, and thanks everyone for the work that you're doing. So, any questions? On to the consent agenda. We have the report on invoices paid for the municipal services January 1st to January 31st, 2023, and the recommendation before you. Can I have someone to make that motion? Councillor Martin, Councillor Hanson, all those in favor? Carried. Any new business tonight? Councillor Benson.
I don't know if appropriate, but I was just maybe, your recommendation of the committee and Doug's, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate to make a motion to develop this committee?
To strike up the committee?
Yes, and I was thinking that under Councillor Hanson's housing committee, could this be one, because we haven't really received a clear mandate on what is required, could that fall under that committee?
I would suggest that we refer it to staff to come forward, but I'm not sure how that works. You don't know?
I don't know either.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm definitely interested in doing that, so leave it with me, Becca, and I'll see what I can find out.
I'd be interested in participating in that committee as well, Your Worship.
Same.
Thank you. Any other new business? So next item on the agenda is adjournment. All those in favor? Oh, somebody has to make the motion. Councillor Benson, Councillor Wilson, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone.